There you go, Joby.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Well, and now listen, I want to know. Let's talk about this.
Children of the Corn was the first piece that Stephen King had written that I had ever read of his work. We then went on to interview directors for the project. One of the directors we interviewed was Sam Raimi, at the time a very young filmmaker who had just completed his first project. If my memory serves me well, one of the things on the poster that helped that film sell was a quote from Stephen King. And when I saw that poster that didn't have name stars or the kind of artwork that, say, the fabulous poster for Halloween, the classic it's a pumpkin and it's a hand with a knife poster, and I saw that the sales on that movie were so spectacular, I started to really understand who Stephen King was. And then I started to read a lot of his work. I understand how he has a recurring thesis of the enormity of evil. And I think it's just so fabulous what he's done with that. And he's one of my favorite authors. I had been recently named to the position of Vice President in charge of worldwide film production for the New World Studios. And I had asked to be able to hire someone that I had known from an experience that I had in Indiana. His name is David Simpkins. He's a popular showrunner these days with credits such as Dresden Files, Adventures of Briscoe County, but at the time he had a nice entry-level position in the industry. He had actually been corresponding back and forth to Stephen King, who it was legendary the way he would answer his own fan mail. And David Simpkins had suggested that Stephen King's story, The Children of the Corn, was available. And he knew this through correspondences with Mr. King. I then found out that the current rights holders were the Hal Roach Studios, and I asked our legal department to enter into a negotiation. It was successful, and that became literally the second picture that we produced after the acquisition of New World Studios from Roger Corman. As we undertook to adapt Children of the Corn into a feature-length project, we faced several challenges. And the biggest one was most probably the fact that I was 26 years old and thought that I knew a lot of things. And as Mark Twain would say, and I hope I have this quote close to being accurate, when I was, I believe it was 18, I thought my father was one of the dumbest people on earth. And when I was 21, I was surprised to find out how much he had learned in 3 years. That's the story of the obstacles on Children of the Corn. As a very youthful producer, I was convinced that movies had happy endings. So I took the relationship that Stephen had so brilliantly defined between the protagonists, Bert and Vicky, and I put them into a situation that resolved itself into a happy marriage, which is contra to the whole thesis of the story that he wrote. I thought that it was far too much to ask the audience to buy children as simply the antagonists with no redemption, as was the case with films like Village of the Damned. So I had the writer who did the adaptation introduce two charming, lovely little kids that are Disney-like characters that you hold their hands and watch the movie with. We had the obstacles of the relationship of the leader of the Children of the Corn with the children, wherein Isaac, if you will, was in a power struggle with Malachi. Stephen King wrote a story where Malachi was a true believer.
Do it now, or your punishment shall be 1,000 times 1,000 deaths, each more horrible than the last.
They are tired of your talk, Isaac. I've shown them what I can do. Cut the woman down.
When we were casting the movie, we were fortunate to have one of, in my opinion, the best casting team ever assembled in Los Angeles. The late Linda Francis, and assisting her on the show was the fabulous Jeff Greenberg. Linda is no longer with us, and she brought us everyone. I'll never forget the day she called me up and said, "Now, I heard everything you wanted me to do to cast the role of Isaac, but I have a kid, and you've got to see him. He's not 9 years old like you told me. He's actually already been in graduate school. But when you see him, you will understand that there is not a second choice." And she was right. When we went after the roles of Bert and Vicky, she had a way of knowing that Linda Hamilton was going to go on to great things. I ended up doing well over 24 projects with Linda Francis, and if you were to look at the films the year we did them and see the actors that are in it, looking back from today, you might ask yourself, how did they get this cast? To select the location, what we quickly learned was the cycle of corn. As you move farther west, you have more time to shoot it. As you stay farther east, you have less time. Corn naturally has a cycle of somewhere between July and October per se, from the time it starts to the time they detassel and then harvest. Knowing this, we then went to the states that would be good for us for the month of September when our target dates were, and we selected 5 that could be very good for us. After we had selected those 5 states, what we quickly realized was that the one state in particular, Iowa, had a history of using children to harvest their corn. Well, we didn't feel that we would be abusing anything in particular by going to a state where they're in the practice of using children for labor. So what we did was we went to Iowa, and just as they would harvesting corn, using children, we used lots of children then for our extras in the movie, and we're very pleased with the experience.
I did as you commanded! I was good! I swear it!
We had very little money for special effects at the end. I decided that it was very important to kill he who walks behind the rose. We did the best we could with what we had, and as I look back, I don't think history remembers the end sequence in a flattering way. But at the time, we were very proud that we had done the very best we had with what resources were available to us. So given the time constraints for the project and the money constraints for the project and the own obstacles that I put up, I would say the last obstacle that I encountered then was because of our small budget, rather than get the very top quality, best special effects people in the world, we got special effects people who, instead of digging the ditch the day before, showed up with a shovel on the day of the set. And this was a huge obstacle for us in keeping our short schedule on track. We faced numerous other production obstacles, and we got through them all. I'm very proud of this original production for what we wanted it to be.
Stephen King's Children of the Corn, an adult nightmare.
When we had finished the film, we test screened it in Las Vegas at the Red Rock Theater. I had the pleasure of sitting next to one of the most skilled, veteran, and effective distributors that I had ever known in this business and still ever know in this business. His name is Elliot Seletsky. He's simply the best man at his job, period, end of discussion. We're watching the film together, and we're about 10 minutes into the movie, and there's a scene where Bert and Vicky have run over a child on the road. Vicky walks towards the child. We later learn it's a dream sequence, but as we're watching it, the child sits up in the road. The audience at the Red Rock Theater didn't simply react to the movie. They screamed at a level of volume that could give you tinnitus. It was one of the most effective, shocking, horror cut moments that I can recall ever seeing in a theater. I would compare it to the experience I myself had when I watched another Stephen King film directed by Brian De Palma called Carrie. And there's a scene at the very end of the movie, which is also a dream sequence where a hand comes out of a grave. I don't believe there's ever been a moment I've been so scared in my life as when that hand came out of the grave in Carrie. And I don't think there was a second moment that I've ever seen a reaction so big as when that kid sat up in the road. Well, at that point, Elliot turned to me and started to tell me that I should be getting sequels ready. I didn't really ever have a way to do a good sequel, and so I didn't want to do a film that couldn't have been better than the first one. I just didn't have it in me to figure out how to do Children of the Corn better at the time. I'm very happy with the way it turned out that year, with what we had, with who I was for what it is. And I'm delighted now to be in pre-production to remake it the way I think it should have been.